I'm honored to share the stage with four inspiring advocates who will speak about the cases and causes of their loved ones, a husband, a mother, a sister, and a brother. We're speaking about the plight of political prisoners after marking last week 17 years since the sentencing of the longest-serving political prisoner in Russia, Alexei Pichugin, and the 16-year commemoration of the arrest of Canadian Uyghur Hussein Chilil. We also are marking today 7,500 days, over 20 and a half years, since the longest detained journalists in Eritrea were arrested, including Swedish-Eritrean Dawit Isaak. Who has been held entirely incommunicado. We also just commemorated the first anniversary of the Declaration Against Arbitrary Detention in State-to-State Relations, a practice that the international community vows to end. We will hear dystopian stories in 2022 about individuals facing the harshest sentences on the books for simply discussing current events, human rights, reading about history, and even tweeting, the criminalization of thought itself. They're charged as terrorists and threats to national security, and treated even worse. Arrested at gunpoint, forcibly disappeared for months or years on end, tortured, held in solitary confinement, while their loved ones suffer in the uncertainty of their fate. And we'll hear about the impunity these regimes enjoy, enabled by indifference and complicity, including by the Human Rights Council here in Geneva, where oppressive regimes are elevated to preside over our global human rights agenda. But we'll also hear stories about selfless and resilient rights defenders, a lawyer fighting against government corruption, a humanitarian aid worker with the world's leading humanitarian organization based in Geneva, a women's rights advocate, and women standing up against one of Europe's last dictators. What these courageous individuals share is an unwavering commitment to their countries, choosing to remain or go back home, knowing the physical risks that await, but secure in the righteousness of their cause. And they respond with love, optimism, smiles, and heart-shaped gestures while handcuffed. And we must respond in solidarity with them. If you have a platform, say their names, share their stories. If you're at a human rights organization, build coalitions around their cases, issue statements and letters, join a campaign. If you're in the media, find ways to incorporate their cases in your stories. If you're a government or UN official, raise their names whenever possible in reports, speeches, communications, or meetings. What may seem like a small gesture can serve as a long-term advocacy tool and might ultimately tip the scales. If you have access to the halls of power, especially with Belarusian, Saudi, Iranian, or Chinese officials, confront them with these cases at every opportunity. Demand answers. The experience of our chair of the Raoul Wallenberg Centre for Human Rights, Professor Erwin Kotler, who has seen the release of political prisoners due to sustained advocacy, should serve as a guide. After Natan Sharansky, a political prisoner in the former Soviet Union, and Professor Kotler's first case, was released, Mikhail Gorbachev told him that when he traveled the world as agriculture secretary, he would get bombarded with questions and protests about Sharansky. When Gorbachev became the leader of the Soviet Union, he understood that keeping Sharansky imprisoned was hurting the Soviet Union politically, diplomatically, and economically. It was then he realized, as he said, that it was in the Soviet Union's self-interest to release him, and so they did. And the future of Belarus, China, Saudi Arabia, and Iran, the future prosperity, will similarly become synonymous with the release of Abdulrahman Al-Sadhan, Maria Kalesnikava, Ding Jiaxi, and Nahid Taghavi.